Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Speaking of New York District Attorney Alvin Bragg, his grand jury in the Stormy Daniels case was the dog that didn't bark this week. Remember, President Trump said over the weekend that he expected to be arrested on Tuesday, and yet the grand jury took a couple days off this week. On Monday, I believe, it heard from another witness who came in, and according to his own explanations to the press, he came in and tried to impugn the testimony of former Trump fixer Michael Cohen. And so, Kim, I mean, it's hard to know what's going on inside this closed process. The grand jury is a little bit of a black box, but it's hard to know whether the grand jury is having second doubts based upon this new testimony it heard about the credibility of Michael Cohen, or whether maybe Alvin Bragg is having second doubts based on a lot of criticism from many corners all across the spectrum, the political spectrum, that maybe this prosecution is not such a bright idea.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of theories. It's impossible to know. I mean, one is that you got to remember, Alvin Bragg is bringing what you can only describe as an extremely tenuous case here. He essentially wants to claim that Trump falsified a business record. Only the problem is that that's a misdemeanor in New York, and it's also moot given that there's a 2-year statute of limitations, and these payments to Michael Cohen finished in 2017. So instead, he's trying to bump this into a felony by claiming a charge of falsification in aid of another crime, which also requires him to then hinge that charge on yet another one that somehow the Trump Organization payment broke campaign finance laws. It gets even more complicated. Campaign finance laws are very convoluted. Meanwhile, the main witness here is Michael Cohen, is a convicted perjurer. There's just a lot weighing down this case. So could be that testimony early in the week gave the jury some second doubts. Could be that Alvin Bragg is having some second doubts. Could be that he's taking some more time to try to find another witness of his own to rebut some of that testimony the grand jury heard. Could be that the grand jury was simply involved in another case for a while, in that when these grand juries meet, they don't always exclusively just focus on one case. Sometimes they are managing a number of them. We're not going to know for a while yet. I would like to hope that Alvin Bragg is rethinking this because of the potential consequences of it. But I guess we're going to remain on suspended animation watch until at least next week.
In the meantime, though, this case is sucking a lot of the oxygen out of the political arena. One notable development this week was House Republicans, particularly Jim Jordan, congressman from Ohio, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, sent a letter to Alvin Bragg asking for materials related to his investigation. Bragg has rejected that idea. But Kate, what do you make of this, the idea of a federal body, federal legislative committee demanding to do oversight of a local state prosecutor?
Kyle, it's bad on the merits. It's worse on the politics. Bragg is not going to cooperate, and he will have the law on his side. But I am just as concerned, Kyle, with the fact that this is just so distracting from the things that House Republicans should be focused on. I mean, there is a coming budget fight, and the House Republicans don't have a budget resolution yet, for instance. They really need to be focused on their priorities and what they're going to tell the country about how they would govern if they were given either the Senate or the White House in 2024. So I think wasting precious political capital with such a thin House majority on a project like this is both a legal and political mistake. And it would be an unforced error to just ladle this other abuse on top of the abuse that we might see from Bragg here.
Well, Kim, we'll give you the last word, but the questions that a lot of people have been debating about are whether a charge against Donald Trump in this case would help or hurt his 2024 candidacy. And maybe it depends on which segment of voters you're talking about, but it does seem like there are many unknowns, in particular how closely Republicans outside of Trump's campaign continue to try to defend him, and what Trump's ultimate reaction to a charge would be. He has called for protests, and this is a tweet, I guess it's a Truth Social post about 14 hours ago. He says, what kind of a person can charge another person, in this case, a former president of the United States who got more votes than any sitting president in history, ... when it is known by all that no crime has committed and also known that potential death and destruction in such a false charge could be catastrophic for our country. And it is not clear to me, Kim, exactly what he's talking about there, but if there are protests after a Trump indictment and there is death and destruction involved on them, I mean, it seems to me like that would push this more toward the side of this harming Trump's 2024 candidacy and Republicans perhaps regretting defending him so to the hilt.
It's hard to know how this will play. You know, I think Kate made a really good point earlier about DeSantis hitting Trump for the things that Trump deserves to be hit on and also pulling out some of his good parts of his record. And you saw DeSantis, you know, taking a swing at him over this payment to a former mistress. This is designed to remind people that Donald Trump, again, does have a lot of baggage when he comes around. And that has caused some people to say, well, you know, the fact that he's now being hauled up, he could potentially get handcuffed. Maybe this is going to make voters say, you know, we're tired of this drama. We want something new, especially Republican primary voters. But here's my problem, though. I tend to look at what Democrats do. They don't always do everything right, but there's clearly a reason they want Donald Trump in the headlines all the time, front and center. And it's because they know he's very polarizing. They know he's polarizing to the base, but also very polarizing to incredibly important key sections of the general electorate, including suburban voters. And they feel if they can keep him in the news, tie him to the Republican Party, make him the continual figurehead of that party, that it's going to be to their electoral benefit. And by the way, that did help them, obviously, in the most recent midterms. So far, that assessment has been correct. So I am in the category of those who think that, you know, Donald Trump might like this because it'll keep him in the headlines, and he loves to be in the headlines. Whether or not that's good for the Republican Party overall, I think is very hard to make the case that it is, especially when Democrats, you know, they can point out that if Trump were to become the nominee, they know they can beat him because they've already done it before.
Thank you, Kim and Kate. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back next week with another edition of Potomac Watch.